are the other jurisdictions, Arlington and Fairfax, are considering or have already adopted calendars that have additional holidays. And so the question for us is, what do we feel about these potential additional holidays? Vice Chair Russell.
One thing that I'd like to request is if it would be possible, and I guess this is a little off topic, to get a list of the state holidays, because I think at this point we probably generally know, but it might be helpful to have a comprehensive list just so we could see where they fall on the calendar and also what they actually are.
Thank you, Vice Chair Russell. Other thoughts on holidays? And just a reminder, right? Remember, tonight is a discussion and sort of give ideas and feedback, and then Dr. Noonan and staff will actually take that response and come back to us again in November. This isn't the decision day on any of this. Dr. Dimmitt.
I'll just weigh in on Veterans Day because this is something I hear about from friends who have government jobs. They really love that their kids go to school and both parents get the day off. That's
I'm not going to comment on that, although I could, I suppose. My kid might see this, so I'm not going to say anything. Ms. Downs.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Yeah, I think echoing Dr. Noonan's comments, I think it is worth, I'm looking at specifically the religious holidays. I think that's worth a more in-depth discussion, and not, again, knowing that we are in the middle of a pandemic right now, so that's probably not for this upcoming year, but I would, eventually, maybe it would be good to take a deeper dive into looking at some of those other religious holidays for the following year.
Thank you, Ms. Downs. Ms. Snyder.
I don't know whether it would be possible resource-wise to look into having days off for religious holidays this year, but I know that especially at Mason, students have been really frustrated when they don't get off for religious holidays, when there are like school events on religious holidays too. So I think that's definitely something that should be looked into sooner rather than later. And I know there are a lot of considerations right now, but if we could do it this year, I think that would mean a lot to a lot of people.
Thank you, Ms. Snyder. Mr. Webb.
I do think the religious holiday piece does need to get looked at a little deeper. My question would be within that deeper dive is just looking how we would adjust the calendar to absorb adding holidays to it and or extending school year, or how we would do it. But that's probably one of my bigger questions about adding some of the additional religious holidays. And then I also look at it from a perspective of that inclusion piece that we're talking about now. It does give that opportunity to be a little bit more inclusive of other religions within the school system as we kind of look to be a little bit more inclusive with everything that we're trying to do.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. Looking at Ms. Litton, and I'm also looking at Mr. Reidinger to see, Mr. Reidinger, if you've got any comments that you want to make at this point.
Thank you, Chair. I would lean toward. I don't know why I'm.
Now we can.
I was unmuted before. I would prefer. Yeah, it's always difficult for me to think about these questions in the abstract without seeing an option before us. So my preference, while it's a bit more work for staff, and I know that's hard at this time, would be to model as one of the calendar options what it would look like with those days added to see what the effect is on starting and closing dates. So I would prefer, I think, like Ms. Snyder and Mr. Webb, to see us adopt the appropriate religious holidays that we can fit into the calendar for next year, if possible.
Thank you, Mr. Reidinger. Ms. Linton, I don't know if you had any comments that you wanted to make. If not, it's fine.
No, I'm just trying to think through this. Because I would agree with folks that I like the idea of adding the religious holidays. I think it's just trying to figure it out. And, you know, do we not do Indigenous Peoples Day and Columbus Day and instead do add some religious holidays? You know, I can agree with Mr. Reidinger. It's just, there's a lot of choices to be made there, and it's kind of hard to imagine without seeing. So I do think at least at some point, if we can't figure it out this year, you know, I think in the future, we definitely should take a look at adding some religious holidays. You know, on the new state holidays, I do think we should give those. I guess the question is, do you also give those to teachers, or are they work days? You know, that's kind of a tough one, I think, because since they are state holidays, it does seem like it would make sense to give those to our teachers. But again, it's just kind of making the puzzle work. So I hadn't responded because I don't really have any answers. Those are just sort of my questions that don't have answers. So yeah.
Well, that's we're in a work session, right? Where we often ask questions that we don't actually have answers for. That's fine. Other thoughts on this one? I will share mine, but I want to make sure that you all have a chance. Dr. Dimick.
I agree with my colleagues that to be inclusive, it would be great to be able to recognize these other religious holidays that we're not currently recognizing. But I think we also need to be mindful that we will not be doing, I don't think we'll be doing a post-Labor Day start if we do something like that, just because of how September will look and what the calendar will look like. So it's, but I think it's an important decision for us to make.
Thank you, Dr. Dimick. Ms. Litton, go ahead.
And this is kind of a question that I don't know that we even want to go down this road, but I'm trying to, in the past, I think we've sort of built in snow days. And given technology and the way people are now able to work online, you know, I don't know if we've given any thought to, do we still sort of need kind of snow days? Do we think those aren't going to happen? So maybe we don't need to build extra days in. I don't know. I just kind of raise that as a place. I don't even know if we want to go down that road, but I'll just raise it.
Oh, I think that's a great point. The past few years, we haven't had a whole lot of snow with the climate changing, setting aside days that go unused year after year. Maybe we shouldn't set them aside.
Thank you, Ms. Litton. Thank you, Dr. Dimick. I guess I'll add my thought on this one is I'm aligned with I would like us to be able to make these religious holidays as holidays in our calendar, but I would need to see the impact of that on the calendar as a whole. So I'm aligned with what Mr. Reidinger said about seeing an option with them and an option without them is probably for me what I would need. I think if we can make them happen, Ms. Snyder, we should make them happen. I just think I myself would like to see the total impact of that, because there's other questions before us as well, like do we have a target end date for the year? And if we have a target end date and we're adding more holidays, you know, what does that look like on the beginning? I recall from our discussions last year that there was strong support for a 2-week winter break if we want to do that, and these other things. What's the impact on the calendar as a whole? So to me, it's sort of looking at that piece holistically. In response to the question about snow days and climate change, I would point out the Washington Post had an article that said we're going to get 10 times as much snow this winter as last year. And when you clicked through the clickbait, they pointed out that we got 0.6 inches last year in total. So open question whether that's much of a role, but yeah. Okay, so I mean, that's sort of where I sit on this, is I would actually like to see a couple of options for us to understand, and at the next discussion, being able to sort of see what that sense looks like. But Ms. Downs.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. I completely agree with my colleagues. And I guess I wasn't on the school board when that June 15th end date was sort of vocalized or agreed on. I hate to give a constraint that, I know last year, I think there was a discussion, well, maybe we don't need to end on June 15th, but that was sort of the understood guidance. So I think it's better to give a little bit of flexibility to Dr. Noonan and his staff as they're coming up with some options, and not to be so concerned with that hard and fast end date, but that's just my opinion. Thanks.
So I kind of have the sense that people would like to see a couple of options brought forward, one with and one without. But Dr. Noonan, are there other considerations that you wanted to make sure that that would be useful for the planning?
We're going to have to work through logistically what that looks like, because typically we bring you one that the staff has voted on as the option that they've selected. That's traditionally how we've done it, but it doesn't mean we have to do it that way always. So I think we probably will need to all have sort of an internal conversation about what we'll present in November. But I hear you that you'd like to maybe see two options, one with the religious holidays, one without the religious holidays. Some of the, you've already sort of addressed some of the items that are assumptions that we make in the calendar: 3 days at Thanksgiving, 2 weeks at winter break, a spring break that's a week long. And so when you start to chip away at some of those, to build in some other holidays to keep the year sort of constrained, that's one option. The other option is to keep those and then add those days in and let the year go longer. So, I mean, what you'll end up seeing, I can tell you now, is the one without will probably have the start date at a certain time and a week earlier end time than the one that has a start date and a week later when we start to add in these other options. So it really is a matter of, do you want a start date that's the same and end a week earlier or a week later? And I think one of the things that we heard last year and heard before, and I'm just sharing with you very candidly, what I think we heard from the staff was, if you're going to have us come back earlier, we want to get out earlier. Now, we're able to talk to them and say, yes, but you're also going to have some additional days in there. Maybe there's some give and take. So we certainly can look at it. I have reached out, just as an example, to the state superintendent to ask if we can have flexibility around Labor Day, because Rosh Hashanah this coming year is the day after Labor Day. And so instead of giving the Friday, could we give the Tuesday? And then that allows us to have a 5-day week the week before, but then have 2 days after Labor Day weekend that includes Rosh Hashanah. That's sort of low-hanging fruit that we could take care of, that would also build in one of the religious holidays. Then we'd look at how could we get Yom Kippur in, and then looking at Diwali and looking at Eid. I think your questions about online learning are interesting. I do want to just remind the board that when we start, we're required to start with 180 days of instruction. It's not actually 990 hours, so we have to start with an X number of days to start the calendar. And then as we begin to get into snow days and the like, we may change the method. The state will let us change the methodology to 990 hours as opposed to 180 days. So we can't start with the 990, if that makes sense. But you do raise a good question, about snow days. Do we have snow days now that we can do online learning? I think we might get some pushback on that one, but it's certainly worthy of a conversation, perhaps with the team. But I do think, just in the abstract, I do think it's fair to say that the way we've always done things isn't the way we're going to do things in the future. This pandemic is going to change us, and one of the ways that it can change us is the school calendar. One example that we shared with some people just the other day was, does it really matter when we start? What if we start the second week of August? I mean, we can't by code, but if we did, and we said, if you can't be here, No problem. Just do your work online. We'll stream it. You can do your work wherever you are.